Oh. 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 KV2. Hi folks, and welcome to the Ace Tanker for the IS-4, a Tier 10 Russian heavy tank, at least one of them, the one that isn't the IS-7. This is probably seen a little bit rarer. It's not as common on the battlefield as the IS-7, and it's quite an interesting tank. Originally it was developed in 1943, or when the concept was first put forward in 1943, it was as competition to the IS-3, so it was an alternative to the IS-3, but the IS-3 developed quicker. And by the time the IS-3 was on the block or being produced, the IS-4 was still in development. So they continued developing it, and instead of being a competition for the IS-3, it ended up being the successor. So in 1946, when the IS-3 ended production, the IS-4 went into production, and the first prototypes were built. So this was a tank that actually went into competition. It went into trials. The prototypes were trialed against the IS-6 prototypes, but the IS-4 won, even though the IS-6 and the IS-4 both passed their trials, because the IS-4 was considered to have superior armor. So essentially, by about from 1946 to 1948, the tank went into production as a successor to the IS-3. About 250 were built, depending on what sources you read. Some say slightly more than 250, some say a little bit less than 250, but 250 is a nice round number. And the tank was developed basically to go into combat in Korea. The Korean War was beginning. Russia thought they might have to get involved, so the IS-4s were actually built with Korea, or involvement in the Korean conflict, in mind. But regardless, Russia then moved away from heavy tank design, started moving towards lighter, more mobile tanks, because the IS-4 was definitely not light, and it was definitely not mobile, basically, the tank ended up with only 250 of them being built before being replaced eventually by the T-10. So anyway, there's the history. We are here on... This is Himmelsdorf. Yes, Himmelsdorf. It's been a while since I made a video because I've been trying to do the T-44-100 mission. I've logged in to make videos, but I ended up being in the garage and then ended up playing, so I'm trying to get the T-44-100 so I don't have to pay real hard money for it because I'm broke. Anyway, yeah, that's why there haven't been videos in the last couple of days. I've simply just logged in to make videos and then ended up playing, and then by the time I'd finished playing I was too tired. Yep, IS-4. It is in competition with the IS-7 according to the tech tree in World of Tanks. So let's do a quick comparison between the IS-4 and the IS-7. So the IS-4 comes at the end of the heavy Russian lines, beginning with the KV-3, at which point you move on to the KV-4, the ST-1, and finally the IS-4. The IS-7 is at the end of the IS line of tanks. So you got the IS, the IS-3, the T-10, and which was originally the IS-10, and then the IS-7. So they're considered slightly more competitive tanks, and as I think as a result, a lot of people tend to go for the IS-7 before they go for the IS-4. But a quick breakdown between the two tanks, and you can see that basically we've got higher DPM on the IS-4. Hey, that's a positive. We've got higher penetration, but we don't have as much alpha, and we don't have as much module damage. We've got a slightly faster rate of fire and slightly faster reload, meaning we've got slightly better DPM, but that extra alpha kind of keeps things still pretty close for the IS-7. The shell velocity is a little bit quicker, and same amount of ammo. When it comes to weapons handling, however, the aim time and accuracy are actually better on the IS-4. It's considered maybe a slightly better gun regarding its aim time and accuracy, but just slightly. The gun dispersion, however, while shooting on the move and while turning your tank isn't as good as the IS-7's, but the accuracy after firing, the gun dispersion after firing, is actually better. The gun elevation is slightly worse, but almost unnoticeable, and then we come to movement. So the gun is probably a little bit better than on the IS-4, but regards movement, it's definitely a lot worse because the top speed is a lot slower, 43 kilometers an hour compared to 59. The reverse speed is a little bit slower, 14 compared to 15. The engine is incredibly poor, 750 horsepower engine compared to a 1050 horsepower engine, so therefore the power to weight ratio isn't very good. However, the IS-7 gets an advantage when it comes to terrain, or the IS-4 gets an advantage when it comes to terrain resistance, so it may not have as good horsepower to weight ratio, but it does have better ground resistance, but still got a slower top speed. The turret traverse, slightly worse than the IS-7. The tank traverse, slightly worse than the IS-7. The hull armor is worse on front. IS-4 has 140mm on front compared to 150 on the IS-7, but it's got better side armor, 160 compared to 150, same rear armor, but the turret armor is significantly better. You've got 250 on front, 200 on the side, 170 on the rear. That is much better than the IS-7. When it comes to health, this is another big bonus for the IS-4. It gets 2,500 health compared to 2,150, so that is a difference of 350 hit points between the two tier 10 Russian heavy tanks. That's enough to take a shot. That's enough to take an extra shot, so it gets a huge health boost over the IS-7. When it comes to view range, they both got the same view range, and I think that's pretty much it. So essentially the IS-4 is slower. It doesn't have as good horsepower to weight ratio. It's sluggish compared to the IS-7. It's got a slower top speed by a huge margin. The gun handling seems to be, you know, a little bit better, aim time, accuracy, penetration, but the DPM is roughly about the same. The gun handling is maybe a little bit better on the IS-7, and then the health is much better on the IS-4 than it is over the IS-7. So, yeah, the two tanks, they couldn't be more different, to be honest, because the IS-7 is all about hiding its lower glides. It's all about going hull down, keeping that pike nose pointed directly towards the enemy, and the IS-4's armor is the exact opposite, because the IS-4's armor can be surprisingly good against lower tier tanks. Now I'm stressing lower tier tanks because higher tier tanks, other tier 10s, are usually going to have no problems penning the front of an IS-4, but I'm going to show you why the armor is so good on the IS-4, and that's because the lower glacis is actually not great. It's got 212mm, or 12mm of effective armor. However, it's got track links added to it, and those track links also count as additional armor, so the lower glacis actually gets up to 238mm of effective armor. That's enough to cause IS-3's problems penning it. IS-3s can't pen the lower glacis frontally on the IS-4. The upper glacis is weak. Again, it's only got about 227. If, for example, an IS-3 gets a high penetration RNG roll, it might be able to pen the upper glacis, but it needs to be a high penetration. Average penetration, below average penetration RNG roll, not going to pen the upper glacis or the upper front plate on the IS-4. So yeah, the upper plate, it's going to be easily penned by tier 10s, most tier 9s, but, you know, tier 8s are going to have problems. These cheeks, you know, as you can see, they're sloped. These are extremely effective at 400. So this is when the tank is facing directly towards you, but that is probably a mistake you make if you're playing the IS-4, because unlike the IS-7, you do not keep this tank pointed directly towards enemy tanks. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to go hull down, hide your entire frontal hull, and basically just expose this turret. And you can see that the turret can be extremely good. There are a couple of weak spots that may be able to be penned just beside the gun mantlet, but they're quite difficult to hit. You can see that the armor can be extremely effective on the cheeks, to the side of the cheeks. The gun mantlet is extremely good. So frontally, the turret is very good. There is a very weak turret roof, though. It's only got 30mm of armor, and that means that guns that have 90mm or 90mm caliber guns are going to be able to overmatch the roof armor. So you've got to keep this roof armor hidden. You've got to keep your gun maybe pointed up in the air to hide this roof armor, to stop enemy tanks shooting your roof. You got to try and maybe prevent tanks from getting above you and shooting down on your roof. But so the roof armor, not amazing if you're playing against players who know what they're doing, but most times a lot of the players who are facing an IS-4 don't know what they're doing. And you know, that's probably down to the fact you don't see as many IS-4s on the battlefield as you do IS-7s. The cupola is not weak. You'd think that the cupola might be a weak spot, but you can see the cupola, again, only going to be a weak spot against other tier 9s, maybe tier 10s, and that's assuming they can hit it. So mainly from the front, if you're in a tier 8 or a scout, you're going to have problems penning this tank unless you've got a 90mm gun and can actually hit the roof. So yeah, you've got these cheeks. Now on Russian tanks, these cheeks are usually the weak spot of a tank when you try to side scrape. So when we angle, what you can see is we're actually straightening up these cheeks, but as you can see, the cheeks are still very, very good. They're up to, you know, even a pretty much extreme angle here. We've got 275 millimeters of armor on our cheeks. So tier 8's still going to have huge, huge problems penning the cheeks, even when the IS-4 is side scraping. So the cheeks can be very, very good. Again, tier 9s, tier 10s going to have no problems penning them, but so you got to be careful against higher tier tanks. But this is a tank that's built to bully lower tier tanks, so the cheeks still extremely effective even when side scraping. And the reason you want to side scrape in this tank is because the side armor extremely good. It's sloped, no spaced armor like the IS-7, but it's sloped, and you get up to about 360 350 millimeters. The tracks count as spaced armor, and as you can see, again, 320 millimeters of effective armor plus tracks, so that's going to absorb quite a few shots. The turret armor extremely good, even when slightly sloped, slightly angled. So the turret armor incredibly good. This is a tank that's armored all round. You're going to be side scraping, you're going to be angling. You always want to engage tanks at an angle, even though it seems to be a bad idea in most ISs. But you know, when you can see that at this angle, even though it's quite extreme, you're giving this angle to enemy tanks, they're still going to have, especially if they're tier 8s, problems penning the side of your tank. And now your upper glacis, which is considered weak, is now much, much better. You're up to 268. Your lower glacis at 350. You always want to stay at an angle, especially against lower tier tanks. So the side armor, extremely good. It's a side scraper, it's an angler, and the rear of the turret, quite good, 170. You know, you have got weaker areas. This flat area here is only 136. This area here is only 135. But having said that, I have bounced plenty of tanks with the rear of my armor. You can side scrape. People shoot the back of your turret thinking that maybe it's a weak spot, but 179 is still going to cause lower tier scouts a lot of problems. So this is a tank that's extremely well rounded with regards its armor, and that's probably why it's at the end of the heavy Russian tank line. Even though its frontal armor does not look quite as good as the IS-7, the side armor, the rear armor, the turret armor is all extremely good. So as I say, when you're playing the IS-4, you never really want to point your tank directly at enemy tanks. You want to stay hull down, and you want to keep your tank at an angle. Even though it seems like a silly idea, even an extreme angle on the IS-4 is still very, very good. Which brings us back to Himmelsdorf and the IS-4, and I'm going to be pretty much doing everything in this game that I've just described in Tanks GG. We're going to be angling, we're going to be side scraping, we're going to be going hull down and just exposing our turret, because I think that's when the IS-4 is played at its best. It is such an advantage to understand whatever tank you're driving. To go into tanks blind, even though I do it now and again to try and learn from experience, not always the best. If you've unlocked a new tank and you haven't played it yet, it's always best to check some guides, to check some advice, check it out in Tanks GG, see what the armor profile is like, and if you understand the strengths and weaknesses of your tank, that's wonderful for you playing it. And unfortunately hit the window instead of the IS-3, but also, even if you don't have an IS-3, but you're fighting IS-3, or IS-4s I should say, I don't know why I called it the IS-3 there, but if you're fighting IS-4s, then you understand their strengths and weaknesses, and you can avoid basically shooting armor you can't pen. So know your enemy as much as you know your friendly tanks. So moving on, I'm hull down. You can see I'm just exposing my turret. I'm playing hull down, just like the IS-4 I think is extremely strong at doing. The only thing you need to do is avoid shots at your roof. I'm keeping an eye on the minimap. Now what I'm actually doing here is I'm counting tanks. I know it doesn't look it here, but I'm actually counting tanks. So the enemy have quite a few nasty tanks. They've got an IS-7, they've got Jagdpanzer E-100s. I did have a hint of a shot at the IS-7, which is why I'm still hanging here. I'm waiting for the IS-7 to reverse. I'm hoping that the Jagdpanzer E-100s advance, but it doesn't look like they're doing it. Now here is the moment I realize that almost every single tank on the enemy team has now been spotted. Patterns have been spotted, tanks have been spotted in the hills, and the only thing to my right on the 3 line is an IS-3 and a T-28 prototype. I have no fear. I have absolutely no fear of these tanks. There's a KV-4 and an IS-3 on the D line, so you can see, look, shot in the move. This is horrible at shooting on the move, but look, we're going to angle, and we're not giving him any shots at the front of our tank. He's not gonna shoot. Now, I have no fear. I have no fear of this T-28 prototype. I have no fear of this IS-3. What I want to do is I want to come up here. I actually popped up here to get side shots on the Jagdpanzer E-100s who are sitting on the 8 line, because they're the tanks that can cause us a lot of problems. So I'm staying at an angle. I don't care if I'm surrounded. I'm just surrounded by tier 8s. And this is when the IS-4 is in its element. Unfortunately, tracks are absorbed. And look at that. I mean, he shot my cheek. He shot the cheek of my tank, but he's going to have severe problems penning me. I don't know what I was doing there. I thought the KV-4 maybe was dead, or I thought the KV-4 was looking the other way, but you can see that unfortunately the reload, not amazing on this tank, even though the DPM is okay for a tier 10. We pop out, going to finish off the KV-4 eventually on 42 health, wonderful, and we're bouncing. We're just bouncing shot after shot after shot. All they can do, you can see I'm constantly at an angle. All they can actually do is detract me. Now, the one shot I did take, the one bit of damage I did take was because, unfortunately, the KV-4 got a shot into my track wheel. But these are tier 4s. We've just bounced with our turret again. So, okay, moving back up. And we can bully lower tier tanks. Okay, now it's time to go for it. Time to go for it, Irish. No, okay, I hang around, bounce the IS-7. This guy's having severe problems penning me. And you can see I'm constantly looking for shots at the Jagdpanzer E-100s, because they're the tanks I actually advanced. This IS-4 is just a huge bully. Shot on the move, angle, bounce. Now, I think maybe the IS-3 is either using a stock gun, or he doesn't know where to shoot me. So I've turned around, and you can see I'm focused on the Jagdpanzer E-100s. Managed to track the pattern for doing 0 damage. And we bounce. Okay, so I'm not worried about this IS-3. I'm worried about relieving the pressure on the 8 line. Okay, side of a Jagdpanzer E-100, and we take him out. So there's mission accomplished. We're taking out one of them. IS-7 moves on. Look at me. Angled, boom, he bounces. So he's starting to annoy me now. I was able to ignore him up till now, but okay, let's just take him out. And I derp my shot. I derp my shot into his side armor. So there you go. Tier 8 versus Tier 10. Side armor still incredibly OP. He's got side armor, I don't. That's not fair, but we take out the IS-3, continuing to advance, and it's all about flanking in this game. It's all about angling, staying hull down. Once again, I'm trying to keep rubble in front of me, so the only thing the enemy tanks have to shoot is my turret. So moving up, Jagdpanzer E-100, T-30. Okay, he's ignoring me, so we're going to move up. We're going to angle again. We're going to use this corner. Yep, there we go. We don't give him the front of our tank, or at least we try to avoid the front of our tank, and he shoots me in the tracks. Tracks absorb it, and we put another shot in. So even though the alpha isn't as high as the IS-7, the alpha is still pretty good on this gun. Okay, can we get the T-30 this time? And we got more than enough penetration to go through him, as even as he's angled. So we're side scraping, staying angled. He's not going to shoot me again. No, he ignores me, so we can move on. It looks like our team are dominating. Only 3 tanks left on the enemy team. IS-7 side of the turret, and that was an incredibly bad shot. Oh, I don't know why I went for that shot, but anyway. Patton looks as if, well, he did move. He moved a fraction ago, but it looks maybe as if he's rage quit. We get one shot in. I'm not quite sure. Okay, check the Jagdpanzer E-100's not looking at my way. So we can, oh, don't get to finish off the pattern, but we do get to get a shot into the back of the Jagdpanzer E-100. Maybe in hindsight I could have gone for a track shot there to try and get some assistance damage, but move up, get to the rear. Although he sees me coming, he turns, get a shot into his side, and our team take him out. So yeah, I didn't think this was an ace. I thought this was a pretty standard IS-4 game. Just angled, stayed hull down, kept an eye on the minimap, saw when all the tier 9s and 10s were spotted, and then went on the rampage against a bunch of tier 8s. So I thought that was just the IS-4, pretty standard game, but apparently it was good enough for the ace, so I'm not complaining. I've had great games. I mean, even though the IS-4 is not as popular as the IS-7, I kind of enjoy the tank, especially when you can get into scenarios where you can side scrape, where you can angle, where you're facing lower tier tanks. I think the IS-4 can be a lot of fun. I've also been playing the IS-7. In fact, I picked up the IS-7 ace tanker recently as well, so that's going to be brought to you very soon. But we finished up with 5,000 damage done. Again, I thought I could have had more damage out of that game, bounced a few shots, only picked up 3 kills. Again, probably could have gotten a couple more kills had I been more aware, and finished up with 1126 XP. Again, enough to get the ace, but kind of surprised. I thought it was a very, very, you know, I was playing kind of on autopilot and just playing the tank to its strengths. I didn't think it'd be good enough to pick up the ace, but it was. It was my first ace in the tank. So fired 20, hit 18, 5k damage I'm happy with. Blocked 4,000 damage with my armor. Look at that, 13 hits received, 12 non-pens. I only got penned once, and that's because I came around the corner and a KV-4 managed to get a shot into my inside track wheel. I wasn't angled quite enough, but that's how good the armor on the IS-4 can be, as long as you keep it sloped, as long as you keep it against lower tier tanks. You know, tier 10's gonna have no problems shooting through the shoulders on my tank, even if I'm side scraping. Tier 9's gonna have no problem shooting through most of my tank, although, you know, it is possible to bounce them, but, you know, there are far more weak spots if you've got big guns shooting at you. So we spotted 2, damaged 6, destroyed 3, did 1,400 assistance damage, and finished up with 48,000 credits with a premium account. That's a tier 10, guys, and we finished up with 50,000 credits. That's not too shabby. First game of the day left me on 3,378. So yeah, IS-4, I quite like this. I do quite like it. I don't know, there's part of me that tells myself that the IS-4 is better in random battles than the IS-7 is, because the IS-7, once tanks get to your side, once tanks get to your rear, the IS-7 is a lot more vulnerable than the IS-4 is. Even when tanks get to your side and rear in the IS-4, they are going to have problems penning you. You can bounce tanks from the side and rear of the IS-4 that you can't in the IS-7. So I think the IS-7, much better tank in choke points, where you can go hold down, control a choke point, control an area of the map. But when you're playing in a random battle and, you know, you want to brawl and you've got tanks to your side and rear, I think the IS-4 can be more effective than an IS-7 can. But overall, I mean, again, I guess it's down to map design. There are more maps that maybe suit the IS-7 than the IS-4, where you can go hold down, hold a choke point, whereas the IS-4 you got to go hold down. But you know, I think the best feature of the IS-4 is its side armor and being able to side scrape an angle, and there are fewer maps that give you that opportunity in World of Tanks than give the IS-7 opportunity to go hold down and hold a choke point. But I quite like the IS-4. I enjoyed my time in it. The ace now, so I don't know how often I'm going to be playing it, but there you go, guys. As always, this is part of the 5k subscribers special week, so just leave a comment for a chance to win a Steam game, maybe an origami tank, who knows. Good luck. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.